Western Conference Podcast, your boy Big Body Cisco. And it's been a long time coming for this one.
Yes,
I got my Uso Faa'Vae in the building, Island Avenue. How you doing, my Uso?
Man, healthy and hustling, man. You know that. You know that.
When you say healthy and hustling, when you hit me with that 10-mile run today, I said, I was in bed like this, like, oh yeah, maybe I should go do this. But how you doing, Uso?
Man, blessed.
Yeah,
Honored to be here, brother.
You've been doing it.
Yeah.
And I've been watching, from the outside looking in social medias and everything that's going on. But, we've been connected through the family for a long time, through the brothers, everybody that's been around. But, here at Western Conference, we just always want to tell everybody's story like we was talking about before. And it's just because your story is crazy. Yeah. And that's just from me watching it, like from everybody afar, else. Yep. And when people call Western Conference Podcast, it's to kind of tell your story your way. So if anybody got any questions, I always try not to date our content too, because if they would say, oh, who's this Island Avenue? Go watch the podcast. Yep. And everything they get from that is from here. Yep. So you got to take us back to the days of Carson, how this whole thing even came about, because your entrepreneurship is crazy.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So, man, where do we start? Obviously, I believe our story is similar to every Polynesian story.
Yeah,
right? We
absolutely.
all migrated from the motherland. Some of us went up to the Bay. Some of us went to LA. A lot of our Samoan families actually migrated to what was considered the harbor area.
Yeah.
So cities like Wilmington, San Pedro, Carson, Harbor City, and then migrated out to Long Beach as well as Compton. And so, just like I said, like every other Samoan family, we created a community. Yeah. And ironically, there was about 10 Samoan families that moved on the street, and it's called Island Avenue.
Yeah,
hence
that's crazy.
Hence,
because when I had seen that part, like I said, you guys must have took the sign down and made
we're just gonna name it that.
But that was the actual street name.
It was the actual street. Yeah. So I believe, it was divine, and as I always mentioned, that we had a sense of community, we had a sense of culture. Right, there was one specific chief ceremony that was literally in the middle of the street that I still have memories of, right?
Wow.
I don't know if they actually got permits to do that, but
we ain't never going that route.
Yeah,
we just started
the street
going
off and had two chiefs in the middle of the street and just got with it. So at that point, again, we had a lot of culture at that point, and that was great. But just like every other community within Los Angeles, we was also impacted by gang culture.
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
So, a lot of our family members unfortunately passed because of that, due to gang violence. However, I bring that up because obviously that's part of the story, but it's also left an indelible mark on me. Yeah, in a positive way. Yeah, right. Because as they say, with pain, it's either you transform or transfer the pain.
What you do with it.
Yeah, we transform from it, and so. Luckily enough, we was inspired by so much that was going on in LA at the time. Obviously, like other Polynesians within football, we utilize our football talent to seek higher education as well as to play at the next level. Yeah. And this is where our connection comes in because, I'm a Cal Bear. Yeah. You know what I mean? Go Bears.
Come on,
you know
man.
What I mean? So
from LA to the Bay, it was always a connection. Yeah.
And so fortunate enough, was able to go out to the Bay. I have a special place in my heart because of the Bay. I was there from 96 to 2000. Great memories. Yeah. Again, playing in the Bay at the time. It was Pac-10. Come on. And then became Pac-12.
Well, it was real Pac-10, though. Yeah.
I don't know. It's not even a thing anymore. It don't even exist anymore.
Exactly. Well, Pac-10 was it was a powerhouse at that time.
It was a powerhouse at that time. So it had some great memories there. Shout out, and again, I really want to make this shout out to all the Aingas in the Bay that took care of me at the time, right? Your Ainga, your Ainga at the time. Big Uso Sam, obviously man. Frisco. I believe Frisco got his. He's out here. Got his barbershop out here. Yeah, and can't forget all the from Tony Rich to Talawenga family. To Soleon and Funtime.
Man, I just seen Sully the other day, man. It's good to see all the Usos like that too, because like you said, the connection between SoCal and NorCal is like, because I started off in Long Beach before we moved to the Bay. And like you said, like the families were there. Like we were there, my family was in Long Beach, and we had family in Carson. And, for us to go from there to the Bay Area, that's why all my Long Beach family always says, hey, you better say you from Long Beach. Because,
you keep leaving that out.
Because when you grew up and threw up, I always say when you start high school, that's where you got, that's like what you claim. So, but the Bay Area ties it wasn't that far off. Yeah. But when you're there for athletics, it's a getaway from the gang culture, because you're talking about a time where gang culture and gang activity was big. So like for you to get out of that, like was that something that you as growing up in Carson, was something that I got to do something to get up out of here?
Yeah, because earlier on I lost my hero in 1992, which is the eldest of my family. Yeah. He was my eldest brother, and so at that point, we knew that we didn't want to go down that route.
Yeah.
And so, you know my older brother, Loam.
Yeah,
Loam
man.
he paved the way, went on to Utah State at the time, and then kind of opened up that door to Division I football. Mind you, at that time, again, it was VCR tape.
Exactly.
So you didn't have what we had.
That was your film.
Yeah, that was your film, right?
Yeah. You didn't have the huddles.
Yeah, you didn't have none of that.
Yeah.
And so he figured out actually for us how to get out of there. So I went on to Cal, and then to date, you know, proud, I guess you could say, stat that's within my specific family that my son and then Loam's son that's at De La Salle now.
Come on, balling.
He'll be the 7th one
Yeah.
to sign a Division I scholarship,
Man.
right? With no help, with no resources, with none of that. And knowing from where we came from to where we are today, it's great to have shared that accomplishment with my son. You know, I went on Pac-10, he played in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And now fast forward, what we're doing in business, because I've always been a proponent of, yes, we've succeeded within sports and entertainment, but what is life after football?
Yeah.
No one's really harping on that, right?
Because no one teaches you that
No
either.
one teaches it.
Like when you growing up in car, like before the football stuff, like take me like when you growing up with the brothers, like I want to take our viewers back to the time where, you know, before you got to this athletics part, where you was growing up in Carson, like, you know, you lost your older brother. You grow shout out Lomi too. That's the fam right there too. But just to kind of transition that to like saying, what we gonna do? You know, after that, you know, shock of what happened to the family. Like, when do you guys as a family kind of say, hey guys, we kind of like got to steer a different way? Because not a lot of families do that.
Yeah. It technically started in '92, you know, because we started to hear of our family and friends losing their lives, right? But those bullets, ironically, symbolically, didn't hit home yet, right? So the year before, I lost my relative, which is Lebo, rest in peace.
Yeah, man.
And that's when that hit, and it was like, oh, this is getting real.
It's getting
now
closer.
it's getting closer, right? And ironically, he took his last breath on Island Ave. And so recently we did a couple photo shoots. ABC 7 came out, and I strategically did that interview exactly where he passed.
Man, that's
as a
crazy.
symbol of, look, you know,
symbolically.
this is symbolic of, yes, he did pass here, but look at where you know, how far we came.
Full circle,
and how far we came from that moment, right? The very next year, which was '92, in which I lost my brother, and that's when it was like, oh, this is getting too real.
Yeah, now it's home.
Yeah, now it's really home. And he served as my mother and father because it was 10 of us. And so I technically lost my parents in one day. And it was so tragic. However, I was like, man, you know, I knew that we would never feel that kind of pain again, right? And so from that point, we were like, look, you know, we know that if in fact we go down that route, in which he never wanted us to, we know exactly where that's going to lead.
Exactly.
After he passed, people started going to prison, 100 years, you know. And we was like, man, there's no way we're going to go down that route. And so we saw this football thing as an avenue for us to get up out of the neighborhood. Again, at the time, remember, this is the early 90s. There wasn't in the internet. There wasn't, we didn't know relationships.
Pre-internet, pre-iPhone.
So you had to know somebody at these schools to even get in. And so when Loam was able to open up that door, build those relationships at the Division I level, it gave us a shot to get up out of there, right? And now it's like, okay, now we can be able to aspire to live outside of Carson. And at the time, again, there was only so many of us that got up out of the neighborhood. So for me to even go up to the Bay, it was like going to Europe.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know, that was like a world away. Like, oh, shoot.
Because it wasn't Carson. It wasn't home.
Yeah.
It still was a home away from home, but it wasn't like home. Yeah.
And so for me to even, like, you know, just playing special teams, it was really inspiring for everybody that was still back in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was the pivotal moment, right? Because again, we just saw that if in fact we went down that road, that we know where it was going to lead, you know? And so we had this vision of us paying homage to the sacrifice my brother made and saying, look, we want something positive for the family.
Yeah.
And that decision obviously was pivotal, and it changed the trajectory of my family to date.
Because there's a fork where you could go that way where you guys did, and that other way where it could have went bad. Because, I mean, us growing up, you know, in Polynesian homes, we teeter along that line, real. You know, ooh, that's the line right there. And I mean, you know, like just growing up in the '90s, where it's kind of like culture shock, where there's, like you said, I don't know how much to stress that this social media it came out of nowhere, and it took us by storm. Where I feel like if we had those avenues that these kids have now, I mean, like I said, it's all woulda, coulda, shoulda, but we kind of see like, man, we was passing out flyers, we was word of mouth, we had a gift to gab to kind of get like with Long going, you know, taking this tape over to Utah State, so it was just something that we had to adapt to.
Absolutely.
And when you have that fork in the road, you guys decided to go the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, you know, just by making that decision, we see 20 plus years later how that affected and impacted in the most positive way, not only my immediate family, but the community that were seeing us from afar, because they seen, unlike other, I guess you could say, Polynesian Samoan families, we didn't have a big extended family like your family, right? It was really just 10 of us. I probably got like 2 or 3 relatives, and that was it. So when my brother passed, I saw like it was almost that no one's coming to save you.
Yeah, exactly.
We weren't you know, families from Samoa weren't coming to the funeral, none of that.
Yeah.
And so we always operated from our backs is against the wall. What you gonna do with it now? And what decisions will you make to honor your brother's legacy, and at the same time making sure that the future is set? And because of that one decision, obviously we went on to the next level, inspired some of the homies to go on to the next level, seek higher education. And now we return to the community to build businesses, as well as just continue to be inspiration in the community. So it's been a great ride thus far.
Yeah, because at that point, like when you're growing up and you're in the Polynesian, like football was like kind of like our only outlet.
Yeah, that was it.
There was no like podcast. There was no like you know doing shows. So like you know us growing up in the Bay Area is like we had Johnny Tavaki that went over to Cal.
He was there right before I got there.
Yeah, so when he went up there, we was like, damn, he could go, you know. So we kind of seen he was a pilot. Then like back then in the Bay, the Samoan and Tongan connection wasn't as strong as it is now.
Okay.
And I say that to say this because through LA to the Bay Area, I don't think some of these youngsters know. I mean, they're all mixed breeds now because they're Tongan and Samoan. Yeah. But I grew up in an era where it wasn't always cool.
Yeah.
But to kind of see it come together, and it took us, our era, to kind of say, hey guys, it's a sign of something. You know, the Toko Osu movement took over, but it started in the locker rooms of football, colleges, and kind of say, Oos, where you from? And then there was the Tokos and the Usos got together. Like, did that impact you at some point when you were in your college playing career?
It actually did, and unfortunately, I brought this up a couple times, is that unfortunately we didn't grow up in which we created relationships, authentic relationships in LA with our Tongan brothers and sisters, and they were literally 15, 20 minutes from us, right? So when they migrated, they got out, LAX, and they went to the Inglewoods and Hawthorns, and so that's where they actually congregated. And unfortunately, because of gang culture, we were split, right? So we grew up with this stigma that we were enemies, and it's unfortunate. Now, however, there was actually one Tongan family to date. Shout out to my man Stan Makaafi. He was the only, he was the only Tongan family that stayed there. But we had a great relationship with the family, right? And it wasn't until I got to the next level. Now we're playing together. But we still have subconsciously this thing
in the back of your mind.
Back of our mind of like, oh, I don't know, do we get along? Or we
almost jail, like jail culture. Like we're supposed to stay with our own.
With our own. And so I was able to build some great relationships with a couple cats that I played with. And then fast forward, the great thing about it was my son went on to play. And he built great relationships. And a lot of his great friends are all Tongan. Right? And so that was a great thing to see, because I didn't want him to grow up in which we looked at each other that way.
Absolutely.
Right? And behind the scenes now, built some great relationships, even from a business standpoint with some of the Tokos. And we got some great projects that's coming up. And our goal too, and I keep saying this, is that I want this generation to see us together. I don't want them to remember what happened in the past, because they don't really have to.
Absolutely.
It's a painful past, right? And we're trying to build something in which we're unified going forward, because again, at the end of the day, there's not too many of us, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of numbers, but I believe that this is what our ancestors wanted, right? When they made those sacrifices in the islands, when our grandparents made those sacrifices in the islands for us to come here, they didn't want that, right? They wanted us to build together and chase this American dream. And so my goal was, through the business projects that we have coming up with some of our Tokos, is to be able to create that, what they wanted.
And bridge that gap.
Yeah, bridge that gap.
Because we were talking about, I think it's almost generational. Like my dad speaks fluent Tongan.
Oh, wow.
And he was telling us, because he grew up with a Tongan family in Samoa and stuff. So where their generation was kind of like this, it kind of got lost in translation, towards the 90s and stuff, where it was divided. And when I only bring it up nowadays, because when I tell my kids, I say, with this whole thing with the unity thing, it wasn't always like that. Because to make them appreciate what they are going through now. Because, it's still, I noticed it from the Bay to LA, where the Tokos and the Usos, like in the Bay, were a little bit more acceptable. In LA, it was still kind of like, going, and to this day, but it's the way the verbiage and how the whole narrative is kind of set out there. And I think now with kind of seeing, how you connecting with the Tokos out there and kind of doing everything, especially in the entertainment space. I see, you know, people from Josh Totofi, from Jay Boog, we see everybody come together where
coming together.
It's crazy, right? Because we didn't see this. I didn't see this coming because when I see, like, when you guys, it was like sports. Then it was like, what was the pivot from if sports didn't work out? Like, how did that go from sports, from playing football, to kind of say, well, my entrepreneurship for yourself kind of took place? Like, okay, guys, we don't have to do football, but what's my next step? What was the pivot?
Yeah, so I've always, I guess it started young, where I always had this long-term game plan. A lot of my thinking was always playing the long game.
Yeah.
Because I saw, especially with football, even in the 90s, that there were other Samoan cats that were going on to the next level, even playing in the league.
Yeah.
But I saw this pattern of them coming back to the neighborhood empty-handed.
Man.
And so I was like, man, there's a disconnect here to where we have to figure out a plan for life after football. So even when I was at Cal, again, I saw this repetitive pattern. It was only just polys. It was a lot of the male homies that was going through the same thing. And so what I knew that I was like, I got to figure out a game plan for after football and what that looks like. And then I had my son my senior year, ironically, when I was at Cal, and I knew that I had to set up a game plan for him. Our entrepreneurship was always there. My father started his painting business, and so we kind of grew up around.
So that was already in the lineage.
He planted that seed. And as I mentioned, growing up in Carson, remember, you have the Palos Verdes, you have the Manhattan beaches, you have these affluent communities, even in Newport now. And so we were fortunate enough as kids to actually be on job sites in these affluent communities.
Wow, just kind of see that environment.
And so my pops was hired on to paint a lot of these custom homes. So we saw what they were living like.
Yeah,
the possibility. Yeah. And so that's technically where the seed was planted. And I to date, I along with Clown, like, I'm the worst worker. I have no idea what I'm doing.
I'm the lazy one too.
Yeah, I get on a job site and I was just dreaming. Like, I'm supposed to be sanding the doors, and Pops was like, man, you ain't done nothing all day. Because I'm just enamored.
Yeah.
Like,
we work like construction. Like, all my brothers, like, they can work. Yeah. Like, when I went on a construction site, I would build like a bench. It was like, oh, what's that? I was like, oh, it's for me to sit down. But it was like, but we took that because I was like, I got to be doing something else because that was my vision. That was kind of saying, oh, you guys can do that. Nothing against what they was doing, but it was like, I just always wanted to be in something else. I wanted to be different. Yeah. But that's why I take it back to what you were saying with the brothers and kind of having that in the lineage already of the entrepreneurship, where it's like, you have to decide how you're going to take that and how you adapt to that, because now you have to change with the times. Like, did you find it a struggle trying to change with the times as, the 90s went by? Now you're getting into these 2000s where entrepreneurship is, social media is still new to us, but how are we going to make that adaptation to it?
Yeah. Well, as I had mentioned, in the early 2000s, and I'm sure you could recall, because it started, that whole streetwear scene started to boom even in the Bay. Shout out to Mega with
with a black scale,
right? So,
and he started at Huff, actually.
Yeah, he started at Huff. And so I saw a lot of the LA brands starting to boom. And I was just always inspired, because once I started to really dig deep, and a lot of these owners that were starting these brands, no fashion background, no business background, but they were building multi-million-dollar brands.
And it was just an idea that they had.
An idea.
It was crazy.
And they were printing on, Gildan T-shirts and $5 and selling it for for $100. And so the economics was like, man, there's something there, right? And so what I also was inspired by was a lot of the brands had a story behind it. Yeah. And they were building these brands. And then that's when Fairfax hit off. Yeah. And so it became the streetwear mecca. And so just from afar, I was just analyzing different business industries in which I said, if I was to, bet the house on it, what would I go into? And so just to kind of go back to the 90s, if you look at what fashion was growing up in LA, this is where gang culture comes in. Let's contextualize it and put things in perspective. Like, when you wore a khaki suit and Ben Davis and your colors, you knew exactly,
that was the uniform.
Yeah, that was the uniform. Dude was a full-blown gang member,
exactly.
Right? So I saw that fashion served as it served as you expressing yourself.
Representation.
Representation, your individuality.
Absolutely.
So I was like, oh, that's cool. That's kind of cool how you can wear something but not out verbally saying anything.
Without saying anything. They just knew from the uniform.
Just knew from a uniform. And I'm like, I like that. So actually, aside from football, this is what me and my clique, Lom and I, used to do. Yeah. We used to express ourselves just wearing these quirky, crazy outfits, and it expressed ourselves. But not only that, we were going. It was rebellious in the sense because we were going against what everyone else is doing.
You was going against the grain.
Yeah, we're going against the grain. And
y'all
everybody was
Lomi and you and the brothers, they were so fashion forward. We was kind of like, what are they wearing? But I was like, but it kind of looked cool. You know what I mean? And that's because that's just all from pioneering and kind of being at the forefront of it, where we were inspired by the culture from the streets. And then when you had Fairfax and everything taken over, you guys kind of took it upon yourselves like, okay, we could wear a low cutter shirt.
Absolutely.
We could wear a more form fitted shirt where, you go to the Bay, it was tall tees and jeans and jabots. But like that was your fashion sense ever like, okay, I'm fashion forward as you was in school too? That was something that you wanted to take upon?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I saw that later on that when I started to study a lot of these fashion guys, they had that same perspective as well.
Yeah.
They were fashion forward. They were going against the grain. They wanted to wear something that was different from everyone else, right?
What would set them apart from all these other brands?
From everyone else. And so when I saw what they were doing on Fairfax, totally inspired by it. And I really want to harp on this because a lot of young, especially poly entrepreneurs, would ask, well, why did you go into apparel?
Yeah.
And why was specifically that? And it goes back to saying, okay, I know I want to create a product-based business.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what's going on in streetwear. I see that the barrier of entry is very, very low. You didn't need 100 racks to get in.
Yep. It was like a minimal.
A minimum. And then I also saw that there was these young hustlers that was creating these multi-million-dollar brands.
Yeah.
Driving Lambos with Diamond Supply Co. on the side, Rolls Royce.
Shout out Nikki Diamonds, man.
Nikki Diamond, man. Shoot, I got some breaking news with Nikki at the end of this.
Yes.
When I saw that, I was like, man, you know what? It's going to be apparel because of the fact that it really, between Loam and I, really started in the 90s of us expressing ourselves. And then fast forward, I knew that there was a play for us in which we can create a brand that combined the South Pacific as well as the streets of LA.
Yeah.
And so when we were going back and forth in terms of the name, I had some, mind you, I had some dope like LA streetwear names, right?
You got to tell us some of the names, brother.
No, I'm going to leave it because I may end up using that name.
It might be a capsule later on. Yeah, exactly.
And so, it was some great names. And so I was like, but, what is a name that can actually combine those two things? And when we were
like, what went into that? Was it because you wanted to combine what you were trying to do? Because everyone kind of sees a name as saying, okay, it's a representation of something, but you kind of really got to put some thought into it.
Yeah.
Like, what was your thought process into making what it was? Because you already had Island Avenue up there. Like, that was just already there. Yeah. So how'd you kind of intertwine that into what you wanted to do?
Because when I saw the Crooks and Castles, Black Scale, Diamond Supply to Hundreds, I saw that there was depth to the name. Yeah. There was a community that they were building. There was a story behind it, right? And a lot of them was either Bay-based or LA-based. Yeah. And so when I decided to create the brand, I was like, what name would encompass both the South Pacific as well as LA? And then, like I said, I came up with all these different names, and I'm like, man, why not Island Avenue? Man. And then I knew at some point, because I'm playing the long game, that I was going to tell this story of how this name came about. And every time I say, it's actually the street we grew up on.
That's
like,
crazy.
Oh, damn, that's crazy. But not only that, put it even more in context. I always had this vision of being in these big box retailers, right? And so I could easily name it Island Block, in which Joe does Island Block Radio,
Shout out Joe.
Right?
Yes.
But from a marketing standpoint of being on the shelves of a Nordstrom's, of a Macy's, of a Tilly's, okay, it had to be marketable to the general public because of the
content. Speak on that, though. You got to speak on that because I want to hit. I can't stress that enough because when people are like you pivoting board, it has to be marketable. Yeah. Like, elaborate on that a little bit more because I don't think the people watching right now understand or grasp that whole, aura of that because you have to adapt to the masses. Where you can be, the hood could be right here, but you have to be universal, right? It has to have a universal meaning. Wow. So what's something that has to be someone like you to kind of say, nah, this has to be for everybody. Yeah. It has to resonate with everybody.
So first off, I knew once I picked the name of Island Avenue, and then they saw me visually, that I was almost gonna pigeonhole myself because once you see Island Avenue, you see me, and you're like, oh, maybe it's just a Polynesian thing.
Island brand.
It's an island brand. But I knew from an aesthetic standpoint, I knew exactly the vision of which we were gonna go. That for one, the name's gonna be Island Avenue because I know that's fitting for Nordstrom's, for Macy's, for Tilly, just the name in and of itself. But from a design standpoint now, just full transparency, the team that I have aren't Polynesian.
Yeah.
So when they're creating the cut and sew pieces, they're not creating from a Polynesian point of view.
Yeah.
From the denim that we do, from the woven tops, they're actually creating from a more universal perspective.
With
now,
everybody's
perspective. So I actually got. I have a real diverse team that's actually from a creative standpoint creating a lot of these pieces. And I did that by design. Yeah. Ironically, I did that by design because I knew once we put out these pieces, it had to have a universal feel to it. Right? As you can see the bucket that we have on now. Again, Maui to Miami, Miami to Monaco. Yeah. The goal was always to go global.
Big picture. Right?
Big picture.
Big picture. Because, I mean, people look at it and watch this. I was like, okay, it's always a big picture. Yeah. And I think with speaking with yourself and kind of seeing what the vision was. The vision was where we got to get out of this small-minded crabs in a bucket mentality because there's a bigger picture. Meaning you could be in a Nordstrom if you think what it takes to get into a Nordstrom. Yeah. If you're just saying, I'm going to do this Samoan shorts, you know what I mean? Now you're pitched, like you said, I'll talk about the word pigeonhole. You don't want to pigeonhole. We have these conversations not just with fashion, with entertainment, with everything there is, where you don't want to pigeonhole and just be, that's just the poly brand. Yeah. There has to be a little bit more to it. So now that you diversified the crew, people kind of wonder, you were just putting these chess pieces into place.
Absolutely.
Because you kind of knew, okay, I need to get it from the Meulis, I got to get it from the Filipinos, I got it from because if you don't have that backing, you are pigeonholed into this niche market. Absolutely. Speaking of niche market, did you know that was something that, look, we have a poly community that may not be up on what you're trying to do. Yeah. What was going to be the struggle to kind of translate what your vision was to the masses of Polynesians were real critical. Yeah. And they're the biggest critics ever. They're like, that shirt's hella weak. You know, because that's just the mentality. But how was you going to have that struggle to kind of say, okay, let me say this is the way I got to do it? Because that has to be part of the story to kind of say, hey, I had to get over this hump. How'd you get over that?
Well, first of all, I want to let everyone know that's actually operating an apparel brand within the poly space. Yes. There's nothing wrong with that. Because
absolutely.
So let's just put that out there. Because the business owner or that brand owner, that's their vision. That's their vision for the brand. And so
I'm glad you said that.
That's great, right? What I also knew is I was building the brand. Again, I was teetering because I didn't want to pigeonhole the brand, but at the same time, I knew that within fashion, just in general, there was no one that was telling this story from an authentic point of view. Yeah. All right, including California culture in general, as well as the South Pacific. Yeah. At the same time, again, I don't want to pigeonhole the brand. So I knew strategically the way you don't pigeonhole the brand is from the designs. Yeah. Because now you could create, again, a graphic tee, a hoodie, a varsity jacket in which it's all inclusive. And so some of the pieces which I'll show you, you wouldn't even know that I was the owner of the brand. Because I'm creating it from a universal lens.
Outside the box,
right?
Yes.
And so just so everyone knows, especially from the poly point of view, wherever Island Ave goes, our community goes with it. Yeah. That's always been the goal. Because
just let us get the door first. Because I always say,
before everyone critique things, let's get in there first.
Get in the door, then let's tell the story.
And let's tell the story. Yeah. So I have to say this because our superpower, especially from a fashion point of view, again, you want to stand out. Yeah. Right? But when
like
we
come
here,
a punch ball, you want to stick out.
You want to stand out, right? But again, you know, we get here and we go, whoa, you know, the trend is these baggy jeans or these things. And then all of a sudden you change the name and you just forget about the poly point and just you want to go that route. And that's okay. But what I want to do, because I knew that there was no one occupying this lane at that retail level. Yeah. And when I got there, and I really want to emphasize this because being Samoan, being Polynesian, and telling that story that's attached to Island Ave, that actually was the superpower. Yeah. That actually closed the deal.
Come on.
And I just shared with this at a conference yesterday. One guy, you know, they're doing their cosmetics line. Yeah. And he was like, well, you know, when you were going through the buyer-seller meeting, like what was that pivotal moment? And I said, what I saw was as he was analyzing the samples, in his mind, he ended up telling me after that he went from denim to all the, you know, the button-ups and stuff. And I was like, well, why did you give us the deal? And he said, because there's nothing on the floor that looks like this. Yeah. So what that basically told me is us banking on us and our aesthetic and our story of being poly.
Yeah, just the culture in general.
It closed the deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes we don't want to, you know, it's too poly. And I said, look, there's a way in which you can hold strong to who we are and at the same time create a product that's for the masses. Yes. Right? And that's exactly what ended up happening.
Because I mean, like you talk about it, where sometimes people watch it and it's like, oh, okay, they did this and they did that, where they don't see the behind the closed door conversations that you have, because you sit there and you have these big bosses that kind of sit there and be like, you know, I had that before, because everyone's trying to, you know, emulate everything that's already going, oh, okay, I got to do a shirt like that. I got to do a shirt like that.
Absolutely.
But when you kind of like come in out of left field and kind of just say, nah, this is what we're doing, and the story behind it, I can't stress that enough, where it has to have a story behind it. Because if there's no story behind it, especially nowadays, with branding and everything that goes on, if you don't have a story, you're just going off an assumption that somebody off seeing something off the back. You're letting them come up with the whole narrative. Yeah. When you actually build the story, build the background, kind of have something where you do have the culture, where you're not pulling to it, where not within your means. You're pulling to it where this is my brand, and the way you're present is so genuine that I think that's what gets you in these doors. Yeah. And I think a lot of these people and these kids that are watching, because they're entrepreneurs watching these right now, watching this saying, okay, taking notes right now, watching what Faa'Vae did, what do I got to do? Where, you know, whether you have that young designer right there, what can you tell them, you know, what the struggles were with you? Because you know, this is still pre-social media. I mean, before we even get into the social media part, what is some of the advice you can give to that person that's dealing with that at this moment?
I think you harped on a great point in terms of the story. Yeah. Right? Because just like, you know, rappers that pop up every day, everyone wants to create a brand, right? Yeah. But Ralph Lauren, 50 years, okay? And that shows that there was depth to when he created that. There was a long game that he was playing, right? And so I always advise those that want to create a brand, any brand for that matter, what's the story behind it? What's the depth? Yes. And just as you had mentioned, that authenticity always cuts through. Come on. So when you're authentic, that cuts through any ethnic group, right? Yeah. When you're really authentic to building a brand, human beings connect with that. So I knew that. So I knew in building Island Ave's story and telling this inspiring story of, in essence, it's really an immigration story, right? Absolutely. You know, people migrating here and chasing after the American dream. It's just from a Polynesian standpoint. I knew that would cut through.
But they're glued to that.
They're glued to that. Yeah. They're connected because they know it's authentic, right? And so once you solidify that you're going to build a brand, what is the story behind that?
What's the authenticity
behind that? Because in essence, that's what that's the foundation of where you're going to go vertical with it. Whether it's, you know, a shoe brand, a apparel brand, whatever it may be, right? So understanding that, what is the story, making sure it's authentic to you, right? And then at the same time, again, what is your vision for it? Do you want to be in big box stores? Maybe you just want to be online.
Come on, say that again. The vision has to be there.
The vision has to be there, right? I've always aspired, because of the fact that us growing up, never seeing us represented in the big box stores. I said, no, we're going for the big leagues. I need to do this just so I can send a message to our folks that we can play in the big leagues. After us, this was the goal, is to open up the door for other up-and-coming Polynesian brands to be in there. So building your story, being authentic to whatever your story is. And then remember, at the core of every great brand is a great community. Yes. Okay? So you're really trying to build a community.
All these elements,
Nike is a community, right? Carson is a community. You know, Hunters Point is a community. It was a community. That's what you're really trying to build. So I tell everyone that, you know, you're building a brand, have an authentic story. You're building a community, 1, 2, 10, 100 people at a time, and just making sure that whatever social media posts or whatever content that you're putting out is authentic. Yeah. It's authentic to you, right? And if in fact your vision is global, just making sure that the lens of which you're presenting the content online is from a global perspective, right?
Global standpoint.
And I have to go back to, that was strategic in creating the team that I have that's very diverse. Because some of these guys have no idea what the tribal is. The design. I walk in tatted up, man, have no idea what that is. And that's what I wanted, because I'm hiring on some heavy hitters that are in the design community to make sure that, okay, they know exactly what Island Ave stands for. But these are the pieces that we're trying to create. Always stay true to that, have elements of that.
That's
but
the core.
Core, but I want you to create from your lens. Yes. Because I've hired you on to be a hitter in doing that.
To use their experiences.
Use their experience, their expertise. And I do want to say that too as well. I want to emphasize that those that have an apparel brand. You've seen a lot of celebrities, rappers, athletes create apparel brands. And I only tell you this because a lot of them I know. Okay, some of them have thrived, some of them have failed. Absolutely. And the reason being is the team behind it. Okay, so if in fact you have an apparel brand from a poly standpoint and you're trying to build a long-term play with it, just make sure that the team that you have hired on, from your cut and sew people to your graphic designers to your production, are really great at what they do.
And all on the same page with what
and
the
on the
vision
same
is.
page. Because you don't want to hire them and all of a sudden they're not staying true to the core elements of the brand.
And that's cool, but I wanted to do like,
I want to do this. I see Island Ave going this route.
Like, nah, you go over there.
Yeah, you do that
because
on your own.
To stress that where you have to have a team. I mean, I tell these people all the time, the teamwork makes the dream work. It sounds cliche, but to the point where if you have the right pieces of the team and they're all buying into the vision to what you guys are moving for. And I think that's upon you to kind of like instill it to say, okay, he might not be a part of this puzzle, but he might be a part of, to do this and that.
Absolutely.
The importance of the team. Tell the people, the watchers, what the importance of this team is.
I mean, if you look at any team concept, right, from your family to a football team to an actual brand, right? First off, as the brand owner, you got to figure out what your superpower is because entrepreneurs, I could do everything. Yeah. At first, you have to do everything, right? But once you build a long-term brand, the team behind it, you got to know exactly what your components are in your business model. And then you got to figure out, okay, I got to hire on the best in the game to actually to actually promote this brand, right? So once I understood what the business model is for apparel, so you have your designers, from designers to production to marketing to sales, and then accounting. Once you understand those pillars within, then it's like, I just got to hire on the best talent to actually fulfill these jobs, okay?
To progress. Yeah.
And so, but even before hiring on these key components, I had to figure out what my superpower is.
Yeah.
One, again, full disclosure, I always tell everybody, and it made me feel good because the owners of Crooks, the owners of Diamond, all these guys, we actually shared the same expertise, which is I don't know graphic design, I can't sew,
but I can hustle.
Okay, so I knew overall the vision that I have for the brand.
Yeah.
Okay, and so what I did know was, okay, then I got to hire on the best graphic designers to make this dream come alive, my vision come alive. My cut and sew guy, my creative director that I've hired on recently, great at what he does.
Yeah,
he just has to stay true to the core of the brand.
What the vision is,
And so what I do is hire on the best people to fulfill these spots. And from a leadership point of view, I noticed that my superpower is being able to look at it from a macro point of view and just being able to manage the team.
Because you got the best already.
I got the best already.
But now it's your job to, inform them and be like, this is what the piece is supposed to do.
Making sure everybody stays the course. The Belichick. I'm the Belichick of Island Ave, right?
Because you got to find the weak link out of the whole thing. It's like, okay, and whatever the weak link is, you have to focus on that and find what the problem is.
Absolutely. Yeah. So teamwork, having that, understanding your business model, hiring on the best team to make sure that they stay true to the vision and building that. And then remember, too, even with that team, right, you're trying to build for the long term.
Yeah.
Right? So making sure that they understand that there's a long play here if, in fact, they stay on board, right?
Yeah.
So knowing your superpower. Again, I don't know graphic design. You can put up Adobe Illustrator. I have no idea. But I know exactly the long-term vision and the aesthetic for Island Ave.
And if whoever is experiencing that, I know what to do with them.
I know what to do with them, right?
Yes.
The logo has to go like this colorway. That's where I come in terms of being the brand owner and from a leadership standpoint.
So we talked about with the team.
I'm loving this, Cisco.
Come on.
Yeah, I'm loving this.
Because I think this is what people need to see.
Yeah.
They need to see the grassroots, the way it started, the way, because we're going to go into the adaptability. And I think adaptability, when I say that to say this, where you have to adapt to the social media that starts to come into it. Now that the magic shows and the agendas, that starts to come in because now you start to build a community. Now you're seeing the community because you've been there when there wasn't no magic shows, there wasn't no agendas, there was no social media. How was it? How important? I'm gonna rephrase that. Is the adaptability for a brand to everything that's coming in for you to be on top of all your A game for everything that's coming in?
Well, I think it's important for any business, right?
Yeah.
Understanding
not just clothing,
just clothing. Like any business, and with the advent of AI, it's going to disrupt every industry. We don't even know if magic will be around with the advent of AI, right? So understanding what your business industry is, understanding how to pivot, and then how will AI actually disrupt your industry and staying ahead of that, right? So there's a lot of technology that's very interactive with an actual garment that I'm actually looking into. Yeah. Because, again, maybe that will continue to progress the brand. But going back to the trade show stuff, let me just harp on that. Trade shows were great, and they still are great, right?
And for those who don't know what the trade shows are, we gotta let them know where Magic and Agenda was the street apparel shows. I remember the height of it. Like we used to do the parties for Magic, but that's where all the brands came together and kind of like vibed off each other. Kind of, that's where you were buying, materials. That's when you were meeting people from all. And I mean, when we was at the height of it, it wasn't cracking like how it used to be. Yeah, and I say it wasn't because everyone was so vested in their brand. Yes. You're talking about big build outs.
Yes.
At the convention,
$100,000 build out. And
I'm talking about brand from brand. Like I've seen Megas and I've seen Diamond Supply where they put a lot of McCrooks and Castles. We used to do a lot of their parties and we used to do a lot of the things with them. But to see how they adapted, where it was Magic, where those were like the pinnacles, right? Then it was like, okay, what's next? It was always a what's next. Yeah. Was that something for you to kind of say, okay, I see where the Agenda and Magic shows are doing, but I got to always be ready for what's next?
What's next? Yeah, and just so you guys understand, the concept of a trade show is you have buyers and sellers that actually attend, and every industry has an element like that. Magic, and then it transformed to Agenda.
Store owners to talk to buyers.
Yes. As well as I believe it's called Project Show.
Yeah, Project. Yeah.
So just so you guys know, in terms of if you have a brand, if you're considering coming to one of the trade shows, obviously there's a business model behind it, right? They want you to buy the 10 by 10 space, but before you even do that, and this was great. I built great relationships with a lot of the streetwear guys, and they used to tell me earlier on, as you're building this, yes, there's gonna, there's trade shows that you can attend, but just make sure that it works for you from an economic standpoint. You don't want to go to a trade show and pay all those entry fees and have your samples there, and there's no buyers coming to your booth.
You want to be set up right.
You got to be set up right. So they would tell me, like, unless you have commitments from buyers that are going to come into the trade show and they're actually going to place a PO, don't do it. Yeah. So I'm telling y'all, again, a lot of up and coming poly entrepreneurs.
Yeah, exactly. Don't. I want to go make this big. Oh yeah, you want to be prepared because that's all the groundwork, right? Yes. You want to get to make sure that you have buyers that come to the booth that you're spending all this money on. You got this big old booth, but you ain't got no buyers.
No buyers. Yeah. Right. And so we were fortunate enough when we did the deal with Nordstrom's that we didn't meet them at Magic or any of the trade shows. It was a relationship.
Yeah.
And I really want to harp on this in several podcasts and interviews and even some of the speaking gigs that I go on. They ask me about these big meetings that I've been fortunate enough to be in, but it was led from a relationship.
Yeah.
And so I'm a relationship person, right? And a lot of the success that I've had thus far is because of relationships that I built, even from the Bay.
From the Bay,
a lot of Cal alumni that we still keep in touch that they were able to connect me with their people within apparel. Like, it's relationships, right? So, luckily enough, we was able to land that deal, and we didn't have to go to a Magic, right? And so now, again, going back to the trade show stuff, that if in fact you don't have to put out that money, and you could just send what's called a line sheet and land the deal, man, it saved you from coming to Vegas and paying that entry fee.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, exactly.
But it goes back to, like, with the Nordstrom, we're going to get into the Nordstrom deal, but the relationships. Yeah. Like, we talked about the team, we talked about adaptability, but I think relationships stemming from the neighborhood up to college, up to them. I think people don't know how important relationships are these days. Like, there's people burning bridges like it's just nothing. You guys got to remember that these bridges that you may burn might be somebody that you got to go back across that bridge on the way back to the top, right? So talk about these relationships that people have to, to this day that they don't know that maybe they be talking to somebody who owns a brand and how important the conversation has to be with these relationships.
Well, I have to give it up to my older brother who passed. Yeah. And as an example, what I saw earlier on was how he would build friendships, right? He had a name in the street, but a lot of his actual great friends had nothing to do with the street. Yeah. And I noticed that, and not only that, they were from different ethnic backgrounds, right? And so he set a tone or an example of how to just build genuine relationships, friendships that last the test of time. So that planted the seed. And then when I went on to higher education at Cal, I noticed that a lot of those people that actually made change, those that were the chancellors of the schools and owners of companies, that I knew I had to get next to at least build a great relationship, right? Fast forward, now you're in business. Now, if you understand, like, business in general in any different industry, there's these titans that operate at the top, and then there's everybody else, right? And if in fact you can build great relationships with them, it's a matter of a phone call.
Come on, man.
It's really a matter of a phone call, right? And I'm glad you brought that up, Cisco, in terms of burning bridges, right?
Come on.
Because earlier on, again, I learned that from my brother.
Yeah.
Right? Building great relationships. If you say you're going to do something, you do it.
Do it.
You're a man of your word. A man of great character, integrity. That stands the test of time. Man. And as a father, that's the example I wanted to set for my son.
Come on.
Because later on, 20 years from now, when you have to pick up the phone and call in the favor, they're going to pick up the phone. Versus they look at the phone, they go, damn, how he get my number? I don't even know.
Let me
Who got my
decline this
number?
call.
Yeah. Right? But that shows that you build a great relationship and a great personal brand in which people are willing to pick up the phone. Now, fast forward, I'm here now in Vegas for the Alibaba.com conference.
Man, come on,
the
that's
relationships,
huge.
the relationships from that alone of why I'm here, as a speaker. But I'm thinking about the relationships I'm going to build from a personal standpoint, from a community standpoint, from a brand standpoint.
The networking. Because your network is your net worth.
Absolutely.
And I think that's not just a post. That's like real life.
It's real life.
Like it's not what you know. It's really who you know and these relationships that you do build throughout this. Because this seminar that you're speaking to, like that is an opportunity for you to share your story, but it's also an opportunity to kind of say, I'm rubbing shoulders with some of the biggest, elbow rubbers that I need in the industry. Yeah. And that's because you put yourself in that position.
Absolutely.
For those that are not able to be in those positions, how did you kind of say, look, we go back to relationships, we go back to the team to kind of say, I want to be in that room. What steps do they got to take to kind of get around those people? Because I always say, be around well-minded people. Yeah. But sometimes people that are out in the street, they're around the street people. So how do they get into that space? Like kind of give a little bit of advice to those that kind of say, man, I'm trying to be in that room with FAA'VAE as well.
Yeah. Well, first off, success is about proximity, right? So if you're in and around successful folks, and you're confident, and I want to really harp on this, especially from a Polynesian standpoint, confident enough to walk up to a person that you've aspired to be like, introduce yourself and exchange information, and maybe there's some value there, added value or synergy there in which you could build with them, then you got something there, right? But let me go back even before that, even before we're getting into these rooms and building these relationships. Within the Polynesian community, there's been a big thing in terms of confidence, right?
Yes.
Because in order for you to become an entrepreneur, you have to have confidence to take the leap of faith, just like you had did, right? And what I noticed, especially within our Polynesian community and how we're raised, unfortunately, a lot of the time, the kids' confidence is suppressed.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that it's almost disrespectful to verbally actually speak, right?
You're like, hey, shout out.
Yeah. But the problem, the drawback of us raising our kids that way is actually suppresses the kids' confidence. And I've said this in several different forms.
Come on, man.
The reason I bring that up is because as a father, I had to make sure that I implemented confidence in my son.
Yeah.
Because at some point, I knew he was going to do great things at the next level. But at some point, he's the heir to the empire. He's going to have to take it over. And there's a level of confidence that he has to exude when he walks into these rooms, when he runs the company.
Yeah. But it has to be, it has to resonate from what your verbiage is on how you raise you. Because I feel like with, I'm a father as well, is like you have to talk to these kids a certain way. Like you have to adapt to their mindset to kind of say, okay, let me not say how I would have said to like my brothers. I have to kind of not dumb down. I have to kind of transition to what I got to be real careful with how we talk to our kids nowadays because they take everything so literal. And I think, we come from the thing where we could do that, but this one, I always say this generation is a little soft because it softened them up because we're so guarded with our kids. Yeah. And now, like, we was getting our ass when we was growing up. We kind of like, I don't want to whoop their ass because we want to break the cycle. But it's because we have to be careful in this verbiage that we're trying to teach our kids. And I think the adaptability, it goes back to that, where it's like when we're raising our kids and we kind of say, look, this leadership, because confidence can be taken two ways, especially in the Polynesian community. It could be cocky, it could be conceited, it could be confident. They don't know what a confident, Cisco just think he better than everybody. Nah, I'm just confident in what I do. But it's a real thin line. Absolutely. Like, how do you kind of step around that, but kind of saying, look, guys, I'm not sitting here saying I'm just the dude. I'm here to say, like, you could be the dude by just doing these steps, because I feel like we're under the magnifying glass 1,000 times. How do you go about that?
I'm glad that you brought that up, because the way I actually framed it is this. I didn't know it at the time, but I seen from a pattern point of view that this is what I was doing when I was in these big time meetings, is that you have this balance, or I guess this counterbalance within the Polynesian community of humility and confidence.
Man.
Okay? And how do you actually balance that, especially living here in America?
Yeah.
When in essence, you have to be a confident person to take the leap of faith and become a successful entrepreneur. But at the same time, the Polynesian in me said, but you need to be humble though.
Yes.
Right? So what I noticed, I didn't know it at the time, is that I would lead with humility in these meetings. I would lead with humility and smack their ass with confidence. Yeah. Okay, so there was a balance.
But the lead had to be there.
The lead had to be there. Because
if you go straight in with the confidence, it got lost in translation.
It got lost in translation. So I say that, especially within these Polynesian forums, is that they can coexist.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how you actually do it.
And do it the right way.
Do it. Right.
Because some guys, I'm the one that's going to tell you. Sometimes you get the humility and the confidence a little mixed up.
It's all.
And that, like I said, it doesn't just happen overnight either.
Yeah.
The humility and the confidence exudes from what your story is, on what your background is. Because I always say, you don't really know a person because you don't know how they was raised. So you got to kind of keep that in perspective, because nowadays, especially in our Polynesian community, we have to be mindful of things and the way we move. Yeah. Like social media. Everyone posts their wins. They're not. Entrepreneurs be transparent, but to a point where they're not going to post their losses. Yeah. But they'll post their wins, and social media has got so much into the win category where everything is a win. Yeah. They don't see the losses. They don't see the meetings that didn't go well. They don't see the things that people didn't do. So how do you tell people, like, don't get so fixated on what you always see on social media? Good promotional tool on way to do that, but the way you kind of exude it into your brand, you got to be real tight with it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think to the point of what you were saying, that, a lot of times the losses don't get amplified.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? But however, ironically, that's where all the lessons are.
Man.
Right? And that's where the jewels are.
School.
And so what I like to do is share a lot of the losses in real time, which is why I love, what you're doing with the podcast.
Yeah.
Is because I could tell you, like, in real time, none of this has ever been perfect.
Man. Yeah.
Like, we're still figuring it out.
Yes.
In what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis in business, right? And so I like to share a lot of the losses, especially within our Polynesian community, because they only see what the big names and stuff on Instagram, but they don't see a lot of the stressful nights,
the long nights,
maxing out credit cards, how to balance shit. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I like to share, especially from a personal standpoint, because that way they see that this isn't a perfect process. Yeah, right.
Because all they see is like Island Avenue and Nordstrom. Yeah. They don't see what it took to get there. Yeah. They see, like, we would get into it with the Nike collab. Like, they see the wins, like, but they don't see the long sleepless nights that went into that. Like tell us something like that where, those are good, big monument milestones. Yeah. But for somebody that kind of say, look, if you only knew what it took to get to that level, like even get into that to see what it did take to get with these Nordstroms and these Nikes.
Yeah. So first off, again, I want to premise it by saying relationships, right? So in both of those deals, there were relationships that led up to us getting into those rooms to being able to land those deals. Going back to the Nordstrom deal, we were fortunate enough, shout out to the Uso Ed. He's been in the Nordstrom system about 20 plus years, and he's the GM. He was in New York, but now he's in Houston, right? Which is hence why Island Ave is there. That was a relationship, right?
Man,
and then that was a relationship. And then that led to a couple people that we knew at the Nordstrom headquarters. Emails got exchanged. I fly up there, we land that deal, right? Yeah. Again, going back to relationships. But as I walk into that room, I got to go back to the confidence part. Yeah. We really got to harp on that. And I always share this, is because there has to be a level of confidence that you have to express your brand, knowing, let's premise this, knowing there's never been a Polynesian person to walk into this building that's been there since 1901 in Seattle, Washington, the Nordstrom headquarters.
Checking your ID.
Exactly, right? So knowing that, there has to be a level of confidence that I have to sell the brand, to land that deal. That was one thing. And then going back to, from a cultural standpoint, it was a toko that works. Shout out to the Toko Keith.
Yeah. Shout out Keith, man.
I got to shout out Keith.
That's family right there. Yeah.
Shout out to the Toko Asi that set up that meeting, okay? It was a Toko from Inglewood, okay, that was able to greenlight that. We go up there, give a great tour, and then, once again, the confidence thing comes in. We go into their design meeting. And mind you, I dreamt of this moment. I dreamt of that Nordstrom moment. I dreamt of this moment. Now, this is the big leagues. If you know anything about apparel in general, Nike is the behemoth. Come on. Above Louis V, above all these guys, right? So now I'm in the room with the best designers in the world.
Yeah. From Nike.
From Nike. Yeah. Okay? Again, there's a level of confidence someone has to have to, for one, be in the room and then sell them on the concept.
Man. Because now you're in the room.
Now you're in the room now.
What you going to do with your
What you going to do? Just go, what you going to do with it now?
Because now you gotta go back to what you were saying. Lead with that humility and right back with that confidence.
And right back with that confidence. And so when it was showtime, I was like, hey, Keith, so how you want to do? So, the show, the stage is yours. I said, the stage is mine. Okay.
Hold on, real
here
quick.
We go. I waited for this a long time.
Oh, it's my time now?
Yeah. Buckle up. Yeah. Right, but at that point, again, with that confidence, leading with humility, thanking them for the opportunity, for their time, and then going in with our people and our ancestors. And then I felt them. I always say this, always premise this, like I never felt alone going into these rooms. I always felt our community there with me because I knew that all I'm here to do is open up that door for the next Polynesian entrepreneurs to come through.
Because at that point, you are the representation for the people. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You're like, okay, wait, nobody else is going to have this opportunity. So it's not that you have the pressure of it, it's to have the knowledge to know, I'm in here and I'm representing what my brand and what our people are.
And I knew it became bigger than me.
Yeah.
Once I started to see these patterns of me being in these rooms for the first time and them never even meeting a Samoan Polynesian, I knew I was obligated to make sure that I set the bar high, do great business with these folks, because they were looking at me and saying, oh, okay, if we succeeded with Faa'Vae and Island Ave, there must be more than that's coming.
Because now you're leaving a lasting impression.
Yes.
Because now they already had their assumptions before you even spoke about what their things are. Okay, I'm just going to wait to hear this. But when you come at them with what you came at them with, now it's kind of like, okay, there might be more Faa'Vae. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because that's the big mindset. Yeah. We're like, okay, if he's coming and saying this, there could be a plethora of creatives that can do the same thing. So now we're tapped into the market.
Yes.
Because now that people all the time, like, you know, in Vegas, we want to be part of the culture. Oh, we want a poly party.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So, you know, there's a way of the but now that you were in there, it's kind of like saying, okay, you had to represent because you had the deal was obviously closed.
Yeah.
And now that you kind of say, okay, now that the pressure's down, now you kind of got to move forward with it. Like, what's the next steps with all that?
Yeah, so it's exciting. Obviously, specifically with Nordstrom's, we're in 5 doors now. I had mentioned that the next door is going to be here in Vegas, so breaking news.
Come on.
Right here at Fashion Show.
Man,
Fashion
shout out
Mall.
we're going to do some things.
Yeah, we're going to do some things. We're going to set up shop there.
Absolutely, man.
So
that's
our goal
big.
within Nordstrom's system is strategically attack the whole West Coast and then go Midwest and then down South and then the East Coast. And so
that's big,
scaling the brand there. Second thing is, you know, with the whole Nike project, that it's been exciting. Again, it's never been done before. We've already created the first ever Polynesian inspired Air Force One.
Yeah,
I'll show you it before we leave here, Cisco.
for your for my eyes only.
Your eyes only. Right. So that's a groundbreaking moment, and it was great to be a part of this project.
Man,
and so our goal
big.
is I should be flying up there next month. Big meetings that we're having with those folks up there to do an unveiling event up at Nike.
Man,
and then from there, obviously, you know, hopefully we would produce it for the masses, and then. Another part of within Island Avenue is resort wear, and so we've already been in talks with Disney Alani.
We're starting.
We're going that whole Tommy Bahamas, route, and so the whole resort wear piece is what we're expanding on. St. Regis, Miami. We got the Toco that owns the Waldorf in Utah, Kaloa. So just through relationships,
you working?
Again, we working, and the goal is at that level. Is to be able to open up these doors for the next Polynesian creators to come through and then take it beyond. You know, that's always been the goal.
But I gotta take it like this with all the goings ons that's going. Is there every time that Faa'Vae sits there and be like, man, there's a lot of pressure if I don't do what I gotta do because us being behind the lens, being by where I'm on stage, wherever you're in these meetings. I deal with it with mental health where it's like, man, if I don't do this, who's gonna do it? Or who's going to do it the way I want to do it? But then you have those days, which I want to be transparent about, where you don't see on social media, where it's like, man, if I don't do this, am I a failure? Like, are those not that you have to let those thoughts enter your mind, but it has to be something that you kind of like have to figure it could happen. Like, how do you deal with kind of saying, okay, the pressures of all these, all these big things you got going on, how do you deal with those pressures?
It's obviously a great question, but in all honesty, I never felt that I was pressured to actually do these deals.
Man,
because these were just goals and aspirations that I just naturally had, right? And I knew that if in fact we were able to land these deals, I was going in there with y'all, whether you liked it or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With our folks. That was the plan anyway, right? That was always the plan. So it was never anything about pressure, right? And then not only that, I believed in the brand so much. I studied the market, that there was nothing like this out there.
Yeah.
And I knew we had that leverage, right? Whether it was in apparel and all these other ventures that we've been in. And so we did some stuff in the restaurant business as well. And I got to take I got to take the Polynesian community there. We launched the first ever NFT restaurant when NFTs was the thing. Sorry. Breaking news, we sold the restaurant. So now to our Asia partners, and they've expanded it obviously in Asia because NFT is still a thing there. But even that, I got to take our Polynesian community within the NFT, within the NFT space in which we never would have been there as well.
But do you find yourself being a calculated risk taker when you do things like that? Because it is a risk. Like, how do you deal with, like, so NFTs, if they didn't work out, like, you have to have a pivot. Like, I'm trying to stress that fact, because if that fails, you can see where a lot of people can say, oh, well, that didn't do it. I'm just not going to do nothing no more. Because that's the mentality, because you built all this up, whether it's an NFT, whether it's whatever you're doing. And then whenever it gets, the door gets shut on you, it can be, harping on you to be like, man, I failed.
Yeah.
But you got to learn from that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it goes back to the vetting process, right? I only got into the restaurant space because of the first concept, and then I guess you could look at that as a loss, right? Because it didn't expand as fast as I thought it was. And I went into the plant-based concept is because that's my lifestyle, and I want to harp on that, especially from a health point of view.
Come on.
Within our Polynesian community,
especially in our Polynesian community.
So from a lifestyle standpoint, if I was going to put my money where my mouth is, literally, it was going to be a plant-based concept. And so from there, through my relationships, it opened up the other venture with the NFT restaurant, and then that opened up a whole nother door, right? But again, going back to relationships, going back to taking the community in these different spaces, vetting these different deals, having some type of internal compass on, okay, I think this is a great deal, looking at all the partners that's involved in it, what's the upside, what's the downside. But at the same time, remember too, our folks have never been in these spaces. So in essence, it was always going to be a win. Whether it was going to be the plant-based community,
just being in
the space, it was going to be a win. That's a win. So I always calculated, yes, going in there from a business standpoint, maybe the economics didn't stand up like we thought it was, or whatever it was. But I knew that because our folks were never in this space, by us trailblazing this path and taking everybody with us, that it was a win. Yeah. It's always going to be a win.
It's a win because you have the kid that didn't know that was even a possibility. You have somebody that from the outside looking in that we may not know, or from the outside looking in, maybe they came across your social media. It's like, wait, there's a Uso that opened up a plant-based, so, and I think it's always the thought that sparks the next generation.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that you're doing and, that you've been doing. And I think that it's inspiration for everyone that does watch this podcast, because this is the reason for it.
Absolutely.
This is the reason I wanted you to come in, because it's been a long time coming. I always say everything's in God's timing. And when I say when you happen to be in town, and I'm like never in town, so that's why when you were like, oh, she in town, I was like, oh, this happened to be the one week I'm in town. But I think everything comes to fruition because it's like this is the timing for us to talk. Because when somebody wants to know about Island Avenue, somebody wants to know about the ventures, like we're talking Nordstrom, we're talking Nike, like, and we could have easily went with a podcast and went right into that. But I wanted to see what the backstory was to get there, and that was my means to kind of say, well, let's come in here and tell them what the footwork was to get to these. Everyone the accolades are going to be there. But the backstory of what you just told us is what's going to inspire that next entrepreneur.
Generation,
Come on, man. Yeah. But my last question, what's next?
Oh, this is the last one, man. I can go ahead.
What's next for Island Avenue? Yeah, with everything that's going on, what's next for you to kind of tell everybody that what you got working on? Besides all the projects you already have.
Yeah, what's next is to continue to scale the brand, right? Yeah. Both locally as well as globally. Fortunate enough with the Nordstrom relationship, they have 93 doors, and our goal is to get in all 93. Yeah. We've been in talks with the likes of Target and Walmart, the big box stores, because of a diffusion brand that we want to do. There's a water bottle concept that we got coming out. So there's a lot of other projects, but the goal, my initial goal was to get Island Ave to where I feel it could be in terms of growing it globally, and at the same time making sure that all these rooms that we occupy, all these relationships that we build, that it's continued to be a light of inspiration and motivation for our Polynesian community. That's always what it's been. And so if you know me, obviously Cisco knows me and the fam, and as well as, if you know me personally, the goal, I've always said is if I got the contact, you do as well. Yeah. Right? I just got to make sure that you ready to play. You know what I mean?
I got to make sure when you go through that door, you prepare.
You prepare. And so that's why I'm going through this. So making sure that you have all your ducks in a row and you're ready to perform at a high level. Yeah. Right? And so, but it's exciting, man. And, again, Cisco, thank you so much. I'm proud of you and everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Moso.
Man, you don't remember this, but 20 plus years ago, Hawaii.
Yeah.
That's when I first saw you get down. Okay?
Man.
We walk, I think it was Pipelines, one of the spots.
World Cafe, one of them.
One of those. Yeah. And we go up the escalator, I see it, I never forget. And you was doing your MC thing. I'm like, man, this guy's good.
Man. I said, this talking shit had to go somewhere, right? Yeah. So it was something like, especially to see where we came from there to where we at now. It comes to a full circle moment where the inspiration that you had, not just on myself, on the Polynesian community, on these kids that kind of see it, and where I want this podcast to kind of exude to the next generation is that the Usos can do it. Whether
Absolutely.
you're Toko or the Uso, whatever it is, in our Polynesian community, you can do it. And without it sounding like a fortune cookie, right? I always try to say it organically to say, look, when I bring, people, guests like you on here, it's not just to bring it and just kind of just, oh, look what he's doing now. It's to kind of tell the backstory and show you that you can do it. If you're prepared, if you have the right team, the adaptability, and these relationships that you continue to build on a day-to-day basis where you're not burning these bridges going up when you got to go back down from it. But I thank you, Mauso. Island Avenue. Make sure you go check them out on all social media, and make sure you go buy it, because I'm going to go to North. We got to get the big size. Me and Joe are the same size. Shout out Lomi, shout out the family. Thank you, Mauso.
Thank you.
Western Conference Podcast, Island Ave. Bye-bye. I see you, my brother. Peace.
Yes, sir.